Good evening and welcome to the Bronx Buzz. Tonight's program is like many of the other ones we did. We're going to be talking to reporters and writers and editors and filmmakers. That's who we really focus on in this show. And then in our second segment, we're going to do more of the same. We're going to start with a reporter and then we'll go to a filmmaker in our second segment. So let's hep right to it and say hello to our buddy Joe Hirsch, who's the editor in chief of the Mott Haven Herald and Hunts Point Express. Nice to see you, Joe. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, Gary. Same here.
Hope you've had a good summer. You were just telling me that the young people who work on the papers, you're getting a whole new group of them, and you'll get started, I guess, just about any day if you haven't already started.
15 new reporters all
Wow.
started a couple of weeks ago, and they're on the ground and just about to start running.
All right. Very good. On that note, you are also on the ground and running, and you've been running for a little while. I was pleased to notice a section of special projects on the side of the Mott Haven Herald website, and one of them caught my eye, and that was the On the Waterfront project. So, and I'm going to give you the firsthand anecdote and then throw it to you. I'm driving down the Major Deegan Expressway, which I have done 40 million times in my life, and in an increasing way, I am blown away by the skyline I see in front of me because it is not a skyline from Manhattan. It is a skyline from the Bronx of what appear to be luxury buildings. What is going on the South Bronx Harlem River waterfront?
A massive amount of new housing developments, Gary, is what's been going on for the last couple of years, changing the face of the South Bronx, and in particular the Port Morris side, just south of Mott Haven and facing East Harlem along the Harlem River. And so that has been changing the local landscape now for I would say for between the last 3 and 5 years. Anybody who went into a coma 5 years ago and were to return and take a look at our waterfront right now would not recognize it. Would think that they were transported somewhere else.
That is actually true because that's the reaction that I had. I was like, well, wait a minute. Are many or any of these buildings occupied, thereby already changing the nature of the neighborhoods? Or is it really everything's kind of still under construction and then at some point there will be a massive influx of people probably from elsewhere?
There is a mix of people living there and projects that are still underway. And so we are, one interesting question, I think, is because there have been so many radical shakeups in the housing market over the last couple of years as a result of the pandemic, that it's going to be interesting to see whether or not all of these newly created apartments along the Port Morris waterfront are in fact going to meet the developers' preliminary expectations for being able to fill them and get market rates for these places.
This is one of numerous questions. My first question is for the people who have, I mean, I'll just make the assumption, moved from elsewhere to live in these very interesting, culturally rich neighborhoods. Is there a mix or is there a resentment, or are we still trying to figure out how people are going to coexist or adapt, or I'd hate to think not adapt to what's already there?
I would say it's the latter. I think that there is an awful lot of resentment and
Oh,
nervousness on the part of people who live in the neighborhood who rightly feel that they are unable to afford the rents being charged for these new waterfront developments. And at the same time, the ripple effect is causing rents to rise across the neighborhoods, the rest of the South Bronx. Not only are the rents really high on the waterfront, but that means that rents have risen across the area. And so that is creating resentment. And many of the people, many longtime residents, are worried and suspicious that many of the new businesses that are coming in, such as at the tail end of Alexander Avenue toward the waterfront, are not built for them, but rather for newcomers.
and it would price them out, etc. Is there a sense of displacement right now? I mean, the number you quoted there, and just think of this number. We need housing. I'm not sure we need this kind of housing. 4,900 plus apartment units being developed on the waterfront. That's a lot of apartments, and that's thousands of people. Um, uh, are people already being displaced, do you sense? Or it's going to happen because this is the tidal wave that's coming to the Bronx?
I get more of
South
a
Bronx.
tidal wave sense. I think that I I think that there are fears of displacement that are more than actual big numbers.
Mhm. And I remember, the whole dialogue. My goodness, when all that stuff was being created, and then became the Richfield properties and everything else. My goodness, we've been through a lot. There was talk of making the waterfronts public so that everybody could enjoy the waterfront. No, I'm not making the trade that you should lose your housing and get a nice waterfront. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm getting, are we finally going to look? Because I know there's always been talk because we have a waterfront there, and it's been train tracks. Is there a sense that maybe there will be some improvements that will support local traditional Bronxites, or really, let's face it, it's going to be for the people who move in from somewhere else?
I think we're in these are it remains a mystery, Gary. Nobody
Uh,
really knows at this point, and I think
uh,
that there are many that the questions are up in the air. This is all too new. There are a fair number of people locally who say, "Let them in. This is going to make the neighborhood more mixed and interesting. There are going to be more shops, and there is going to be some vibrancy." Um, and so that's the flip side of the other side of the coin of people who are worried and suspicious that the neighborhood is going to change and become increasingly unaffordable for them. So, so as to the ideas about the fate of the waterfront,
who knows?
as
Um, so now Rafael Salamanca, ironically the council member down there, has a whole section. I thought very brilliantly put through the city council a little while back a requirement that anytime there's rezoning or development, that the characteristics of the neighborhood be properly evaluated so that we can understand what is the effect of it. My sense for a lot of this development, it slipped in before that requirement happened, which is how this kind of runaway freight train happened before somebody could get their hooks on it. Is my chronology correct here?
I think that one of the things that we found, in fact, in putting together that series that you just mentioned on the
Right.
waterfront last year, is that the most of the housing happening along the waterfront with views of Manhattan across the Harlem River are market rate, with very little so-called affordable housing, whereby people would be able to rely on area median income to keep the rates relatively affordable. Whereas as you go farther inland and away from the waterfront, that's where you find the affordable housing along the lines of
Yes.
of what the councilman had been vying for.
It's ironic that you say that. We're recording this on a Monday. I believe on Tuesday there's a very big affordable housing thing that's going to open up, like 149th Street or somewhere down there. Um, uh, so now we're back to kind of your original point and your original speculation, which I thought was fascinating. We make the assumption that people are going to come in droves and fill up these apartments at market rates. I don't know. What do we think? It's like you put up a for sale sign. You're going to make any sales? And will people listen? It's transportation rich. You can get downtown very quickly. As pricey as it might be, it's going to be less expensive than doing the same thing on Second Avenue, in Upper Manhattan or somewhere like that. Um, what do you think? Are people going to come here and say, "Wow, I'd love to come down to the Boogie Down and spend my life and invest here"?
It's a fascinating question, Gary, and I don't know the answer because
Oh, okay.
there's so many factors tossed in.
Yeah, yeah,
So yes, it's going to be unaffordable for people many people living in the neighborhood.
right.
It's going to be very likely more affordable for people coming in from Manhattan.
Right.
And so the prices are going to not, they are, at least at the beginning, they're not going to be Manhattan level rents. And so that is the
That's the
presumed
there's
draw.
the
And yet at the
question.
same time, there are questions, are people, you just talked about your 40 million drives along the hideous Major Deegan. Well, how many people coming in from Manhattan are going to want to walk under the Deegan every day to get to and from the 6 train?
Right. And
Uh,
and if they do it and the developers believe there's still a market for it, then you're going to see more changes. I want to add one more thing, and then we're almost out of time, but I got to ask you about that Port Morris waterfront park. I remember somewhere that one of the big hotels, maybe Four Seasons, bought a property on Park Avenue, South Park Avenue. Is that still alive? Like, do they have that with the idea that this was going to be a new place?
I believe that the Opera House, right? Is that the one we're?
No, 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 no,
I'm
no. That's much more further interior. All right, let's not go
Oh,
there.
I
Uh,
think I think the one you're referring to is still there. I've seen it.
Still there. All right. Anyway, let's talk about this is what I think is good news. They're going to talk about the waterfront. There could be a waterfront park over there at Port Morris. So let's just talk about that.
Okay, so the a city nonprofit called the Waterfront Alliance is helping to try to raise the city's interest level in investing in some of these in informally stewarded waterfront, not really parks, but water locations along waterfronts across the city. And apparently, according to the Waterfront Alliance, there are more than 1,000 of these, believe it or not. And Port
Wow.
Morris happens to be one of them. And it was one of 4 that were featured in a meeting that happened a couple of weeks ago. And all of this entire new momentum is based on a comprehensive plan, waterfront comprehensive plan released by the city last year,
Hmm.
trying to help neighborhoods such as the South Bronx, where the people who live in the neighborhood have where there are no access points to their
Right. And
waterfronts.
this is something, listen, this is something that's been talked about. South Bronx Unite has been all over this for generations, if you will. Which, just taking a step back from the conversation we've had. So look at what you've got. Here's some maybe investment for the local community. Of course, ironically, coming at a time when there's new development coming. It's a kind of a tug of war, I suppose. Anyway, Joe, we're going to keep reading the Mott Haven Herald and the Hunts Point Express and all the great new young people that you are training and tutoring. And we're going to ask them to come on the Bronx Buzz. And I can guarantee you we're going to ask you to come back because we're going to answer some of these questions as they unfold in front of us.
And I just have one last note, Gary. We're
Go
at
ahead.
the 10-year anniversary of Sandy, which came within a few hours of flooding the country's biggest food distribution market, the Hunts Point Food Distribution Market. And there was a hue and cry at the time, almost 10 years ago to the day, about the city's need to invest in trying to
And has it been
shore
done?
up the shoreline. It has not been done.
Joe Hirsch, he tells the future. He's got his crystal ball with a little science, never hurt, and a little sense of history. Always great, Joe.
Next time, Gary, we'll talk about what hasn't been done.
Or maybe what has been done. We'll see.
Aha.
Uh, be well. Thank you so much, Joe. We're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm thrilled because, and I know Joe knows them, the Bronx Filmmakers Collective is having their 10th anniversary. We will pop some champagne and celebrate. Don't go away.